welcome to another episode of the Community Broadband Bits podcast. I'm Christopher Mitchell. I'm at the Institute for Local Self-Reliance in St. Paul, Minnesota, and I'm joined by a frequent guest on our shows, Doug Dawson from CCG Consulting, the author of Pots and Pans by CCG, the wonderful daily blog. Welcome back, Doug.
Welcome back to you as well, Christopher. I hope you're having a great new year. This is always interesting to talk about these topics with you.
Well, thank you. You're on here. Usually we do this sort of thing on Connect This. And I'll say that the intro to Community Broadband Bits and Connect This is going to change because we're trying to figure out what we're going to do. But I can tell you that, I don't know, in 6 weeks, perhaps we will have settled on a strategy and we will probably have one new show that unifies this together. We'll be doing some of these like one-on-one interviews, and then also the occasional, 4 to 5 person show. I hope that you'll be there for most of those, Doug. But we're changing it up a little bit and trying to get more bang for the buck, I think.
New year, fresh approach. I'm all for it.
Yeah.
So, yes.
And we're open to ideas. So if people have thoughts, I would appreciate it. I've talked to Travis and Kim, and both of them expressed relief that they wouldn't have to spend as much time with me in the future. So that's good for them. They're having a good year. But no, honestly, like we had a great thing for a lot of years, but I do feel like it feels like it's time to change things up a little bit. And I think we're going to have a little more variety and a little less frequent of the 4 to 5 person shows. It takes a lot out of us to do it. It takes a lot out of me anyway.
Indeed. I'm all for it. Yep.
So, Doug, you and I are going to talk a little bit about some of the stuff that's going on. We actually have numbers from the Fiber Broadband Association from last year. We can talk a little bit about the nature of the fiber business, the number of passings. You also had recently wrote about the wireless mobile decrease in speeds. We'll probably touch on that a little bit industry trends. We're going to talk a little bit about what you're expecting in 2026 that will be popping up that we'll have to pay attention to. And I think we're going to deconstruct a editorial from the Wall Street Journal that is entitled "Trump Unbreaks the Internet," and we'll talk about that. And then finally, I think at the end, I'm just going to have a couple of comments about some of the stuff that's going on. And I'll say that I hope that we get through this. But right now, family members of mine are actually at my son's school, keeping an eye on things. We have, in Minnesota here in Minneapolis and St. Paul, we're having a major challenge with disruption to normal order from the federal government. And I'll just talk briefly about that at the end. But it's possible I'll get a text or a phone call and have to run away here in the middle of the interview. So I hope that doesn't happen. So Doug, we're going to talk first about the fiber trend, I think. And so we got the numbers from the Fiber Broadband Association. Not surprisingly, they say that last year was the best year ever for fiber.
And they're not wrong. I mean, there's a lot of companies building fiber.
Yeah,
we spend all of our time we spend all of our time talking about grants because and the group that we've been talking through, we're very rural oriented, but the money's not coming from grants. It's coming from AT&T and 40 other folks who are building fiber, and they're all going crazy. I mean, towns of 20,000 and up are all going to get fiber. I mean, they're just doing it. It's amazing. We're now seeing a lot of communities getting 2 and 3 fiber providers overbuilding each other. That's what we've always hoped for. That's true competition. I mean, I did some work in Lansing, Michigan, and they have 3 fiber providers on some of the streets. Those folks are spoiled, man. I mean, that's what we all hope to get to someday.
Well, let me ask you about that.
Yeah.
So one of the things that they said, I didn't excerpt this in the prep, but like when a first fiber provider comes to town, I think the expectation was that they would get 40 to 45% of the market. When a second fiber provider comes to town, there's a question of whether they would just cannibalize the first. But it sounds like often when a second provider comes, they on the order of 60% of the market then takes fiber service, and so there's a growth there. Would you say 60% is a low number or a high number? Because I feel like why are only 60% of people taking the best technology?
The answer is that's still low, and what you got to realize is it's economics. People are going to stick with DSL or FWA cellular because it's cheap. And it's not because they wouldn't love to have fiber in their house. It's because it's $30 or $40 a month. And so, every market has 20, 30, 40% of the people who are in the category of lowest cost matters a lot more than quality. And we've got, let's face it, we've all got parents and grandparents, and they are going to stick with And as long as they can stream their Netflix and get their email, they don't really care about fiber. I mean, some of them do, most of them don't. So, but over time, what we know is that 60% will eventually grow to 80 and 90%. And so the cable companies are going to have to go to DOCSIS 4.0 to match them. And effectively, when they do that, they're another fiber provider. We're going to, at that point, the whole market will get to the fast speeds eventually because, the only low option will eventually be FWA wireless. So they're going to have their cheap folks. Everyone else will be on multiple gigabit symmetrical. So it does take time to convince your parents to change to fiber. It just does. It takes them 2, 3, 4. Finally, they go, okay, I'll try it. And then they love it, right? I mean, that's what happens.
Well, let me ask you about the cable. When we transition, so Comcast made a significant investment in the mid split, right? So they have much better upload speeds, still not fiber speeds. When they go to the new DOCSIS, which I thought was like this year, it was when we're going to see some of that transition for them and a little later for Charter maybe. But the question I have is they're going to be able to offer, 10 gigabit symmetrical and so when that happens, do they still have many more single points of failure on the network with amplifiers and things like that? Or are they able to get rid of a lot of that and offer a more reliable product than they had before?
No.
So
there's still coax in the system. And so that hasn't changed. There's not fiber to the home. There's still fiber to the node. And there's already fiber to the node today. So now what they will probably do when they go to DOCSIS 4.0, that'll be an opportunity to split the nodes even further. Today, fiber goes roughly to every 100 to 150 homes. They'll probably lower that to 75 or something. That really makes them start to look like a fiber company at that point, right? So, but still, the coax is subject to freezing and water getting in the lines, and it's subject to true interference of literally somebody's running a chainsaw in the yard and down the street and they interfere with my reception. I mean, they're still subject to all those analog things that happens on copper. So,
okay. Well, what we're seeing is that more than 60% of U.S. households have fiber available to them. And one of the things that I thought FBA said, it kind of contradicts a little bit what you said. Maybe not. You made the point that a lot of the money has come from the big companies putting in their own dollars to expand. But the RDOF and BEAD. Well, they said challenges RDOF and BEAD. They said government investment is still significantly boosting FTTH passings and construction. I think that's the rescue plan dollars and other Biden programs that expanded fiber. But the thing I would note is that, like, what I find interesting is people think of that as being the government intervention in the market when the BBB changed the federal tax law for the 100% bonus depreciation is also government putting its thumb on the scale to encourage more investment. And that is expected to do a lot, right?
Let me put what you just said into perspective. Dollar-wise, grants look big. Here in 2026, there's going to be about $13 billion spent from grant funding, which doesn't count BEAD, assuming that if any BEAD gets actually started this year, which it might, because Louisiana just actually said they signed 6 contracts yesterday. So we might see a little bit of construction. Even there's engineering and stuff to do first. But even without BEAD getting $1, there's $13 billion. $13 billion of grant funding is going to cover maybe 3 or 4 million homes versus there will be 30 or 40 million homes covered by these private investors. They just happen to only spend $2,000 or $3,000 a home. So it sounds big, but in actual passings, it's not very big. It's a still small piece of the market, and it's completely rural. And our whole background is let's make sure rural areas get fiber. So we're very thrilled to see it. It's still a small drop in the big bucket. Now, the vendors love it. I mean, if you sell fiber, it takes 10 times more fiber to get to a rural house than it does to get to an apartment building, so they love rural construction because that's a big dollars and that's where all the money goes. But it's not the predominant reason fiber is expanding. So,
okay. The next thing we wanted to talk about was what's on the in the future, 2026. What should we be thinking about, paying attention to? Did the show last week with Blair Levin. He talked about some of his expectations and things like that. What are some of the top line things that you think we'll be talking about over the course of this year?
One is I'm expecting a really interesting fight to get going on spectrum. Congress came out in the big beautiful bill, which I have a hard time saying that name because there's nothing beautiful about it, but.
No, I'll just say, like, this, it drives me crazy. Yeah. I mean, it's a big, beautiful tax on my son because, like, when you lower taxes and increase spending, it's not You get the
Right,
economy revved up, but it just means that the
right.
next generation gets to spend more.
But anyway, that bill forces the FCC to set aside 800 megahertz of spectrum over the next 3 years, and this is the first of those 3 years for auction, and auctions are all gonna go to cellular. So that's an absolute giveaway to the cellular companies, and the FCC is gonna have to do it, and it's gonna have to be what they call mid-range spectrum, which is between about 700 megahertz and about 6 or 7 gigahertz, and so that's the sweet spot. That's the spectrum everybody wants. There's 100 different uses in there today, and so they're gonna have to cannibalize some of those uses, which means we're gonna have some big, big fights because the math to get to that much spectrum, they're almost gonna have to rob Wi-Fi to do it. And Wi-Fi is the most valuable spectrum we've by a factor of 100 that we've ever had. It's so much more valuable than cellular spectrum because everything runs on it, right? We wouldn't be having this podcast if you and I weren't on Wi-Fi. We could because we're nerdy enough to have
No, it
hardwired
wouldn't.
computers.
Without yeah, no, so let's play that out for a second. Even if we
Yeah,
hardwired the computers, there would be no
yes,
market demand because we
there
wouldn't
would
have
be.
these wireless devices. If people were
No,
paying the kind of prices that, like, the mobile carriers wanted to pay if they weren't disciplined
yes,
by the ability to have hotspots and
yes.
Wi-Fi, I don't think we would see industry have developed in the way that it has at all.
Oh,
So,
I
yeah, I
don't
mean,
think
I
we'd
think it's a really
I
good
don't
point.
think we'd
But
have fi
I
we
wanna
wouldn't have 5G if Wi-Fi wasn't there. You're absolutely right.
but let me ask you.
So there's gonna be a big fight, and it's gonna be the big boys against the big boys. I mean, the cellular carriers won that battle because somehow they got to the lobbyists. I mean, they got into that bill.
Mhm.
Tech guys want the Wi-Fi, so we have 2 really big, uh, factions here are gonna fight like hell over the spectrum. It's gonna be very interesting to watch that battle.
So let me put it in context for people though. So you said between 700 and 7 gigahertz. For people that I think appreciate a lot of that spectrum is being used by government agencies.
It's all being used. It's
Yes,
all
and
being
so, like, some
used.
of it's being
Yes,
used for, like, some of it's being used for things that are inefficient, right? Because the way it was
yes.
used 30 or 40 years ago, you required a broad swath of it to use, and now we can be more efficient with it, and so it needs to be repurposed. This is what the Federal Communications Commission literally exists to do, right?
Yeah,
And the challenge is that
it's their number one
if they have
function.
to if they have to upset people that they're going to take spectrum away from because there's a value to it, even if you're using it inefficiently, the fact that you have access to it provides value to you. You don't have to like invest in new equipment, depending on whether that's the Department of Defense or whether that is an industry. So you have to take it away from someone. Now, I've been sort of poised because you remember our friend Travis had been saying last year that he thought the Federal Communications Commission would pleasantly surprise us. Well, I think I was pleasantly surprised by the Federal Communications Commission a day ago when they announced they're going to have this vote on 6 gigahertz, which is used by Wi-Fi and is going to have some different power limits that seem like it will be better for future devices and faster transmissions and things like that. But you think that's not actually, I think, the end of the story, right?
It's not the end of the story. That's a giveaway to the Wi-Fi industry. It's really a giveaway to rural broadband more than anything else. And
Right. So
so
it's a giveaway that we
that
like.
it's a giveaway that we like because it's going to allow for some faster broadband speeds on Wi-Fi. However, that doesn't mean they're still not going to come back and take half of the spectrum away. It'll just be the high powers on the half that's left. So, and that's not going to please Travis at all that they actually come and rob the spectrum away. There are some inefficient uses. Like there's a little slice the FCC gave 15 years ago for self-driving cars. Total failure. They need to take it back. It was a failure. Everyone
That's the
convinced them.
DSRC, right? The dedicated
Yeah,
short range communications. Yeah.
I mean, everyone convinced them cars would be talking to each other, and the fact is they could talk to each other better with LiDAR than they can with spectrum anyway, so they just don't need that. But that's a really tiny piece of what they have to put up to auction. So all the rest of it, they have to steal it from somebody. Some of they're gonna kick unfortunately, they're gonna kick the military off of some of it because they're not gonna give them a choice. They're gonna say, "We're taking your spectrum." Well, I kinda like that military to have spectrum. I don't know about you, but, one of the big ones that's really useful is weather satellites. It's like, I kinda like weather satellites and
Right.
GPS, right? So, I
Well, and
mean,
that's the thing is that I feel like
every one of these slices has really important stuff on it, so yeah.
yes, and the thing is that, like, there's this question then of like, well, if we take it away from the Department of Defense, if we take it away from the weather satellites, we'll be able to auction it and make more money of it from AT&T. But the net loss to society will be greater because, like, we will
Much
lose
greater.
more in terms
Yes.
of potential defense capacity or others when so AT&T can charge us for it, as opposed to if it went to some sort of open shared spectrum. And this, for me, that
Right.
this is the future. Is not so much carving up the existing spectrum; it is
It's
making sure
sharing
that
it.
spectrum that is not being used in a given location could be repurposed in a way that didn't interfere with the owners of it or the primary license of it. That's the future. But I feel like this FCC doesn't take that very seriously.
And that's the actual real travesty of it, because people win these nationwide licenses and they only use it in 10% of the geography. It's like, why don't you let someone else use it in the other 90% of the geography? And they're going, and they won't, because that threatens their 10% that they are using. So people are sitting on unused spectrum in just piles. So there's a whole lot of better way to solve the problems.
And this is where, I mean, I always appreciate, again, people that have come on our show that bring a lot of financial literacy. One of the things that we don't talk a lot about is just the value of a firm. And a firm that is sitting on spectrum is more valuable and therefore
Yes.
commands more value on Wall Street because they have spectrum that they could put to use in the future. They do not want to give it up, even if they don't have a current plan for it.
EchoStar, which was on the way out the door as a company, because let's face it, satellite TV is dying. I mean, 10 years from now, there will be no satellite TV customers. And it's sinking fast. They got bailed out. I mean, they're making like 60 or 70 billion dollars by selling the spectrum they were sitting on. They're going to leave the market very wealthy. Nothing to do with what they did for a living. They just, years ago, they got a hold of the spectrum for cheap. Now look, and they sat on that spectrum for a decade, and the FCC should have taken it back long ago. So, but instead they sold it to AT&T and they sold it to T-Mobile. So,
What else are we still looking at? So spectrum's a big issue. What else?
well, here's an interesting one, and this is just a week old. Is there a chance that Congress just developed a tiny little minuscule backbone? They're starting to legislate on topics where they're disagreeing with the administration, because if they are, there's 10 or 15 topics just in our space alone that really need legislation. They need to fix the Universal Service Fund. I mean, you name it. We've all talked about all these topics for the last year, right? So it's very possible. I think that that's going to be an interesting thing to watch, to see if they actually start legislating again, because for a year they've been absent. There was only passed 36 bills last year, 20 of which were putting plaques up to name some, congratulate somebody. So there's almost no real legislation last year. But all of a sudden, just in the last week, they've passed 4 or 5 interesting things that no one expected. So I think that's a very, very interesting trend to watch. And
Yeah, and I
maybe
think,
it's
I
just,
mean,
yeah,
for people who aren't paying attention, like there's significant changes in that. It appears that President Trump vetoed a bill for infrastructure projects in Colorado solely because he's mad
yeah,
at Representative Boebert, who's in his
yes.
party, right? And similarly in Florida, and there could be repercussions there where we see backbones starting to develop in some of these people that are a part of Trump's party who will not feel like they have to be beholden to him if he's going to cut them off at the legs in front of their voters.
Well, and the other trend that we have is the administration's losing 95% of its lawsuits. And so all the things that they've canceled about broadband may still come back with the courts. The only question will be, is it too late?
Well, and
But they're,
that's
yeah,
Yeah,
but
I want to do a show on the future on Wicker's bill because
yes,
there's a question that I think of whether the lawsuit happens more quickly or if
right.
some in Congress rubber stamp an approval for illegal changes to the programs.
Correct. So that's another interesting trend to watch. The other interesting trend is the FCC declared itself to not be an independent agency. It's like, well, by law they are, and they're supposed to be independent of everybody. And by saying that they're not independent, he simply said, I'm going to do whatever the president tells me, essentially. And that's really not his role. And at some point, I don't even know what that means, but it's mind-boggling that they would take that approach, because it weakens them. It actually weakens their ability to get anything done, because it makes it so much easier to challenge them in court now. I mean, if he wouldn't have said, he literally just made it 50% easier for lawsuits against the FCC to succeed by saying that, because you can say, this isn't even their position. They're just mimicking the White House position. So,
Well, I mean,
yeah,
I feel like I agree with you 100%. They're clearly an independent agency. The precedents,
yes,
there's not a doubt about it. What I would say, they're not a serious agency anymore, right? I mean, like they're down to what, they have 3 commissioners currently. Like, we'll see
yeah.
how long that even lasts. They're supposed to have 5. It's been we've constantly complained about them. They don't take their job very seriously on most issues. It's incredibly frustrating when you look at the fact that here it is in 2026, and we still have to argue about who has access to the internet. We don't know because the federal government doesn't bother to track it in any kind of way that like passes this little laugh test.
Right. So, yeah, so anyhow, that's something worth watching. You know, as far as other topics, I mean, everything else is just, we're kind of in hold waiting. All the things, I mean, Is BEAD ever gonna actually be built? Travis isn't here today, but it's still a valid question because they're not done making changes to it. They're letting states sign contracts now, but they could pull those back. I mean, we're not at all done yet till there's actually construction done. So, we're just simply not there. There's there's still a bunch of states that haven't got their plan, or will they ever approve California's BEAD plans?
My
Because of
understanding is
the
they're going
yeah,
after NDIA is going after Washington and Vermont because their plans
yeah,
in those 2 states significantly involve public entities getting the funds.
right,
Like these are
right,
proven models that have worked in both
right,
places. And,
right.
I'm strongly supportive of municipal broadband. I think we should see a lot more of it. At the same time, if Nevada told me that like most of their money was going to municipal broadband, I think I would be like kind of confused, but
Right.
in Washington and Vermont, it makes a lot of sense. But
It
the
does.
federal government under Trump and particularly Ariel Roth, they want to try and punish those states for going that direction.
And they're just punishing them for whatever. And so I don't know. At this point, politics sort of override all the other trends. I think we're kind of on hold for everything else. That's unfortunate to say, but
Yeah, no, I mean, I think we want to be honest here. Like, I don't like. There's things that I say where people are like, Chris, you're clearly partisan and you have political beliefs, and and the fact that they're complicated doesn't change the fact that I don't want to hear them. Well, like, it is not controversial in my mind to say that we are not. We don't have a federal government that follows the law, right? When the government is constantly losing its lawsuits, when it cannot find lawyers that will defend its actions, when its own attorneys are being told by the court they literally cannot put their name on documents because they've not been appointed according to the law. Like, these are not like, this isn't me putting my opinion on things. This is like the fact that the federal government is engaged in more lawlessness now than it has throughout most of its history. I'm not going to say all of it, but most of it.
no, they're certainly not partisan. I mean, the fact is when laws are passed and they simply only obey half of it. And that's what they did to BEAD when they simply didn't give the dollars to fiber because they decided not to. No particular reason. They called it the benefit of the bargain. It's like, which was
Right.
no benefit
Right.
or
And
no bargain. Yes.
yeah, and there are processes they could go through in which they would have changed the rules that would have fit
Yes.
with the way the system
Yes.
works, and they decided that would take too long. So,
Right.
so it's very frustrating. I want to ask, is there anything else on predictions? Because I want to get to the Wall Street Journal article here as well.
Nah, my other predictions at this point feel lame.
I mean, I think it's hard to predict,
Yeah.
and just deeply frustrating. Okay, so this is an article, not an article. This is an editorial, and I say that because, like, boy, the delta between a article written by professional reporters at the Wall Street Journal and the editorial board. I don't know if there's a bigger delta in the world right now
Yeah.
between the credibility of these things, but the Wall Street Journal editorial board is its own world, and granted, they're against regulations that I think are reasonable. Difference of opinion. But let's see. He said, and I know that you haven't read this closely, but they're talking about how the Trump administration got rid of a lot of the barriers. So Congress appropriated $42 billion in the 2021 infrastructure bill for states to expand broadband to unserved and rural communities. The spending was unnecessary since satellite services like SpaceX, Starlink, and 5G fixed wireless services were rapidly closing the so-called digital divide. Upward of 99% of households already had high-speed internet. So, Doug, the Wall Street Journal is saying that, like, the market was solving this problem. We did not need any kind of program to address this.
Well, now, first off, let's start with the basics. Somewhere between 88 and 90% of houses actually buy broadband. So there's still 10 to 12% of all houses who don't have it for some reason, whether it's not available at their house or they can't afford it, they don't have it, right? And if you're in a rural area, it might be both because it's like, hey, if my only choice is satellite and I can't afford $120 a month, there is no option in my house. So we certainly have not solved the digital divide. But their real issue there is that somehow Biden had policies in place that were hurting the carriers, and you just can't point to any that did that. Again, Fiber Broadband Associated said it. The amount of fiber that was built in 2024 and 2023 under Biden broke all sorts of records. And the people who build broadband, other than people who get grants, are doing it out of their own pocket. And obviously, regulation didn't stop any of them from building more fiber. They just decided it was a good business plan. And they're actually 5 years later than we thought they should be. It took them a long time to get there because these are big conservative companies. How many years did we beg Verizon and AT&T to please start building fiber over your copper? But once they finally decided to do it, oh my God, they're going gangbusters, right? So I mean, AT&T is covering the country in fiber. I mean, they're going to be by
gotta
far
wonder
the
where
biggest. Yeah.
If AT&T had decided to focus on telecom infrastructure rather than adventuring around in content and owning HBO and those things, you have to wonder where AT&T would be. I got to think its stock price would be much higher. There'd be a lot more
Yeah,
value. They would be in a much better position. There'd be less competition. So maybe it's good that AT&T has been so poorly managed. And for those of us
yeah.
that care about competition, which does not include the Wall Street Journal, like let's be clear about this, because when you read this, it is very clear. The Wall Street Journal's position is basically if people have a service available, it is good enough, right? There is no
Yes.
market for these services. They'll talk about how it's important to have markets for it. But as soon as there's one provider, they're happy with that provider and they don't think there should be further competition. Certainly not a problem that government should solve.
Well, and let's talk FWA wireless because that's the other half of their statement. In rural areas, you have to be within about 2 miles of a cell tower to buy that. And if I go to most rural counties and I plot where the 6, 8, or even 20 cell towers are, it usually still doesn't cover, and you draw 2-mile circles, it probably doesn't cover more than a third of the geography of the county. So that means that 2/3 of the county does not have that as an option, and the cell carriers are not building new towers. So, and there's nothing they can do to make that any better. They can make it faster for the people within the 2 miles as they improve the technology, but they can't make it go any further. It's just a natural limitation of the spectrum they use. So, and so that turns out, believe it or not, that turns out to be a great product for urban areas. Our friend Alan at Open Broadband just posted on my blogs yesterday that he hooked up an FWA customer to 500 gigabits in Charlotte. Well, of course he did. They're in Charlotte.
Right. They're
You know,
close.
they're close to a tower.
Yeah.
It's a great, that's not a bad broadband product. It's like, hey, congratulations to them, but there's nobody in the rural areas is getting that product unless they happen to be under it. I talked to a farmer who was thrilled with his FWA. Literally, he said, the tower's on my land. It's about 3 lots away from my house, and I own where they came and bought the place to put the tower. His neighbor a mile away bought it. They didn't like it all that much because they were getting half the speed. One another mile away bought it, and they instantly turned it back in. They go, this stuff doesn't work at all. It's very, very distance limited. And so in that case, that tower maybe serves 6 people. It's like, really, that's not a giant benefit to that county to have that there. Yeah.
Well, let's also be clear that you've said FWAs. What Alan is doing with Open Broadband is fixed wireless using probably like a Tirana product. A lot of the FWA is the
No, he does every technology. He will sign you up to Starlink. He will sign you up to FWA. He will build his own fixed wireless. He will build fiber. He connects you to the fastest thing you can get. So he actually hooked
my
them
point
up.
is, I think,
He does a
but I don't
professional
think,
installation. Yes.
right, but but I don't think you're getting 500 megabits. Certainly not
Yeah, you
symmetrical
are.
from like a T-Mobile connection.
It wasn't symmetrical. Not at all symmetrical. The upload speeds are probably 15 megabits.
But was he using like a T-Mobile like mobile wireless
Yes.
spectrum for a home product? Oh, and he was getting 500.
Yes.
Okay, I'm just totally wrong.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes. But because he will hook you up to almost any technology. They charge for the professional installation and to make
okay,
sure, and they follow up to make sure it keeps working and that sort of thing. He does a lot of people on his own network, but he also hooks you up to other people's networks.
okay. All right.
But you're absolutely right. That product did not have symmetrical speeds. The upload was probably craps.
But on
And
Tirana, you can also get pretty good upload.
now I'm going to get an email from him going, don't say I signed up somebody with crap.
Well, I mean, let's say not as good as fiber, but probably
Not as good as
something that
fiber.
allows them to do well.
Oh, they're probably they're probably happy with it. Now, is that all that really matters? That the customer's happy with it? Yes.
So this editorial goes on to say fiber projects were also given heavy preference over satellite and fixed wireless services, even though the latter could be installed faster and at a fraction of the cost. It goes on to say, Ms. Roth said this month the administration's deregulation is on track to save taxpayers $21 billion. I want to go to the op-ed board, to the editorial board and say, how we could actually save this country? We could have saved it hundreds of billions of dollars. When you build an interstate, that the first thing you do is you build a dirt road, and then you put a bunch of infrastructure on top of it, including concrete, reinforced concrete. And that takes a lot of time and effort. And if we would just decide to stick with the dirt road rather than going to the trouble of putting the reinforced concrete on top of it, we would save so much money. Wouldn't that be great? Because if you take all the context out of it, it's a savings. Like if you do less and you invest less and you have fewer jobs, you save money. It's not a hard math problem.
Well, the funny thing is they may not have saved anything. She also admitted in a forum in late December that they might have to give the other $21 million to the states anyway, which case they should have might as well used it on infrastructure than to give them for purposes other than infrastructure. But that this was the one we always called that a lifetime opportunity, $40 billion of grants to build infrastructure because it's around for the next 50 to 75 years.
Right, to build infrastructure that would learn from and not duplicate the failures of 20 years of poor spending decisions. And the Trump
Well,
administration literally came in and said, we're just going to do those bad decisions again and ensure that in the future, we need to spend more money again.
and then let's also talk about my neighborhood. 6 counties around me, for some reason that none of us understand, the broadband office gave 100% of the BEAD locations to Amazon One. So you can build it faster. Well, they don't even have a business. They don't have a. It would be faster to build fiber than it is to wait for them to hook those folks up. They're not even an ISP. As of December, they had 102 satellites in the air. They need 3,000 for this to work. So it's like, really? So that's going to be faster than building fiber?
Not if you don't care about those people and you just totally ignore them.
So those counties, 100% went to that ISP who's a non-existent ISP. That Wall Street Journal kind of missed that little footnote there. So yes.
Yeah. This is why we don't take the editorial page seriously.
Well, no, because editorial pages talk about big policies, and you started it off right. They don't like any regulation. So that's their starting premise for. Yeah.
But this is the waving of the hand. Like they want to see markets allocate capital. Well, okay, this is interesting to me because first of all, markets are allocating capital, right? Like a lot of these projects still require private capital in order to work. The federal government is putting a thumb on the scale to say, we want to make sure that these rural markets are not left off. We want to make sure they're not just ignored. And because we built a telephone system 100 years ago to make sure that everyone was connected with roughly comparable technology. That led, as well as electrification, that led to significant productivity improvements that benefited the entire economy. If we had let markets just decide who had telephone service and who had electricity service, we would be relatively impoverished right now, all of us, because our farms would be far less productive. We would have less people on the planet, frankly, given the power of our farms. And we would all be so much worse off. Like the thing that drives me crazy is I am 100% about markets, resolving these issues. And the federal government should be involving itself in a way that is like reciprocal and helpful to markets, not ignoring them. But the idea that just markets alone should do it without any oversight or any sort of planning is totally failed by history.
And let's talk about 3 reasons why BEAD was the right solution. One is our largest economic driver in this country is still agriculture, and farms need broadband. And so they've now cut back on farms getting broadband, and it's really hard to understand why you would do that. I mean, there's no farmer now that doesn't tell you he needs it. Secondly, the federal government now is making everything they do go online, and you can't go online and interface with the government if you don't have broadband. And so it's like, well, if you do A, which is force everybody online, you ought to probably help them get online. Third, this government has said the future is AI. Well, you can't take part in the AI economy if you don't have broadband. It's like, maybe finishing those infrastructure projects was the way to go if those 3 things are all true, and they are all true. So it's like, this doesn't make any policy sense. I mean, every home that got connected to fiber is now able to do all those things. The farm is happy. They can take part in the AI economy. They can take care of working online working with governments. That's what we're supposed to be getting to, right?
Well, and one of the things that is left out of the Wall Street Journal economics is the cost. So the farm will now have a solution from SpaceX, which it already had before. So we're spending money that's totally unneeded in the sense that like that farm could have bought SpaceX 3 years ago. And now we're going to give Elon Musk a check so that farm could buy the same product tomorrow. They're going to be paying more than they would have if a local co-op had built that fiber out. And so they're going to be getting a service that is 5 to 10 times worse just from a bandwidth capacity, not just ignoring the quality of service issues and the interruptions. But they're going to be paying more, like on the order of 20 to 30% more than they would have paid for a fiber connection for 5 to 10 times less connectivity. It's a terrible proposition, but that part they treat like it.
It's even worse. It doesn't work because farmers now upload terabit files about surveys of their fields. They can't do that over Starlink. There's just not enough upload. They couldn't upload it in a week. So they still have to drive that file out to somewhere and give it to somebody. I mean, this is not solving their problem, and it's something they do routinely. I mean, it's simply an unworkable solution. It doesn't actually function. Yes, they can watch Netflix on Starlink. Absolutely. We've now proven through Travis that you can do a webcast, but that's not the same thing as having a working farm.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Any last thoughts on this first show for you and I of the new year?
It was a total success.
You
These
know,
are all
I
these are all good topics. I mean, there's a lot to talk about right now. It's just amazing. Every week there's more topics than you can deal with. It's like you have to kind of whittle the list down to what do we talk about, right? It's really kind of mind-boggling. Yeah.
yeah, it's exciting. Just the amount of technology that's out there. And I think one of the
Yeah.
things that I would expect over time, I don't think it'll change anytime soon, but I think we may talk about more tech beyond the internet.
Yes.
Although
Yes.
we will always ground ourselves in the internet because I feel like kind of like electricity was the basis of everything moving forward, all the technology. It's hard to imagine a technology that is created in the next few years or next decades that isn't assuming connectivity, right? I mean, like
Yes.
the
Yes.
network is essential for all technology moving forward, is what it seems like.
I mean, I just wrote a blog about a new technology that implants a thing in your brain to communicate with computers. It's still based on the internet, right? And it scares the
Wow.
hell out of me. I don't know about you, but
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I read a lot of sci-fi about it. For people that are interested, the Nexus trilogy by Ramez
yeah,
Nam,
yeah,
Naam, is a tremendous
yes,
book about what can happen with that and what happens when that is a network as opposed to just
yes,
an interface for you.
yes,
So I want to follow up with something. And for people that aren't interested in kind of what's happening in Minneapolis and St. Paul, you can feel free to tune out. But I have to say that like it's been very distracting for me. It's difficult. I was up here during the George Floyd murder and then protests and looting. I mean, I'll say that like am firmly frustrated with the way the media covered things because there were people that engaged in looting. Many of them were not from the Twin Cities. Actually, people came in from further away to engage in arson and looting. There were some people as part of protests that did terrible things and looted and burned, but a lot of the looting was separate from protests. And when you're in the middle of some of this stuff, it is hard to reconcile what you're seeing and also the feeling of powerlessness that comes. And I'm just frustrated because around Minnesota, around the Twin Cities in particular, like, I mean, I just found out there was an ice scout at my son's school this morning scouting out what was happening. Parents have organized themselves to be watching after Roosevelt High School in Minneapolis had a major altercation with Border Patrol in that case, I think, escalating things, pushing students and teachers. There's just a lot of things going on. And it's hard to live here and watch, whether it's here or whether it's in LA, masked federal agents who are acting without accountability, who are not following their own rules of engagement in many cases, who don't seem to have any sort of accountability, taking these actions. And it just feels at times like no one cares, right? We have large protests and things like that, but it is difficult. And I find it hard to reconcile as someone who is very pro-government. I think government is important. I think it needs to be controlled. I think government violence needs to be like, very carefully monitored, even though I'm in support of it at times. I think it's necessary, but it just feels very difficult. And I went to an undergrad college where I was mostly, it was a college that's, it's a small school. It's the only private school I've gone to in my whole life. And it was an amazing experience. I met lots of people from overseas. 20% of the student body is international students. Many of them now work in the United States and they have to travel with documents. Even though they've become U.S. citizens, they've been here for 20 years contributing, and they're afraid that they're going to be abducted by someone, even though they're citizens, and have to spend days hoping that the federal system will recognize that they actually have the right to be here rather than being imprisoned while that's being sorted out. This is not the country I wanted to live in. And this is a telecom show. I'm not going to talk about it in the future, I don't think, but like it's a major impact. And I just feel like I can't sit here and not talk about it, even if it turns some people off. I take it seriously, and I want to live in a country where people disagree with me. But when we have government power acting this way, it is dangerous, and we need to get a handle on it. We need to follow the rule of law, and I don't feel like we're doing that. So I want to share that at the end. And Doug, I don't want to ask you to comment on it. I appreciate you, doing this great show with me. And I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank people for their work, and I want to build a great country. Like the last thing I guess I would say is that as I was being shaped and doing this work, I was very influenced by Jim Ballard. And Jim Ballard focused on developing a national strategy for broadband in the 2000s. And the thing that he always said was, we want to be a great nation. And a great nation needs a strategy for this. This is that important. And I've long thought about the work that I do is focused on communities, but I want to build a great nation. I want us to be a great country. And I think we can do that. I think it's going to take a lot of work, but I don't think we're heading in that direction right now. It's really frustrating. Doug, thank you again for joining me on this show. We're going to be doing a couple more shows like this in the community broadband bit space. I think we're eventually going to have a consolidated feed for our various shows. We're talking about the internet. We're trying to think of a new name. We're going to be doing the old shows, similar, but not as frequently in terms of that style of Connect This. So for everyone who's been with us, thank you so much. And Doug, thank you again.
Yes, and let's build a better nation. 100% with you. So, yes, sir.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. One that I think will continue to lead the world. So I want to thank everyone, and I hope everyone is safe and having a good new year. We'll be keeping to the telecom topics in the future shows.
We have transcripts for this and other podcasts available at communitynetworks.org/broadbandbits. Email us at podcast@communitynetworks.org with your ideas for the show. Follow Chris on Blue Sky. His handle's @SportsShotChris. Follow Community Network's stories on Blue Sky. The handle's @CommunityNets. Subscribe to this and other podcasts from ILSR, including Building Local Power, Local Energy Rules, and the Composting for Community podcast. You can access them anywhere you get your podcasts. Catch the latest important research from all of our initiatives if you subscribe to our monthly newsletter at ilsr.org. While you're there, please take a moment to donate. Your support in any amount keeps us going. Thank you to Artie Huseby for the song Warm Duck Shuffle, licensed through Creative Commons.